So for me, it's very important as a sacred activist to not fall into the trappings of the illusion of what the media creates. When the media says Donald Trump did this, or Hillary Clinton said did this, or North Korea said this, I have to remind myself, and I'm constantly doing this, to remind myself that I wasn't there. I don't know what was said. I don't know what was done. I did not experience it. I am experiencing something that A, was experienced by somebody else secondhand, or B, something that was constructed for entertainment purposes uh, to get advertising dollars or to get clickbait, mental clickbait, for lack of a better term. Today's talk is called Transcending the Matrix of Illusion. And for me, it is not only a part of the evolutionary path toward enlightenment, it's not only a part of the awakening that's going on in today's world, but it's an integral part of any part of history, whether it's now that humanity is awakening, or if it was back 2 or 3 thousand years. It's a basic fundamental concept of Buddhist and Eastern philosophy, as well. Now that we have modern psychology and whatnot, understanding how we perceive the world and how shall I say, how much it all is an illusion. And again, one of the other reasons why I felt very inspired was I have over the last several weeks I have been getting a lot of contact lately with the emissaries of light, lots of different downloads, and I kind of feel a lot of changes happening. But even though these changes are happening within me and with those around the world, the reminder that all is an illusion is fundamental to any of our practices. So what do I mean transcending the matrix of illusion? There's many ways to look at it. We can look at it from a psychological point of view. We can look at it from a metaphysical, quantum physical, Eastern philosophy, Buddhist, Taoist way of looking at it, or looking at it in the sense of the ascension process. And I kind of lean more toward the ascension process and explaining this type of philosophy and metaphysics. So what is the matrix of illusion, or how do we transcend it? So imagine in which you feel oneness with the universe. Imagine enjoying bliss and peace of mind, and at the same time acting and functioning normally in your day-to-day life. A state of being active in the world, yet maintaining a state of inner detachment. This is something that we all strive for in this type of work. And as I feel and as I begin to get glimpses of that on a regular basis, I find myself being more at peace and feeling more connected to source consciousness. So in this state, you're aware of your oneness with source, or one spirit, or one love, but also you're aware that the one spirit is acting and manifesting through everything, through things, through plants, through trees, through animals, and through people. This is the experience of non-duality in its highest condition, this state of awareness, this experiential state. And that's one of the things that I feel is very important to get across, is that it is experiential. It is not believing in it. It is not worshiping it. It is not hearing of it from me sharing it, but it's literally being in it, experiencing it. So I want to kind of put a precursor into everything I'm going to talk about today to say that it's very difficult to truly understand the concept through words, through language, through visualization. It is very experiential. So it probably does work out well that I couldn't do a live camera today. So you can feel the words. And I like to use that terminology a lot. I used it at the beginning of my book. feeling the words, experiencing this particular message. So ordinarily, the veil of thoughts and the five senses draw our mind outside to the external world and obscure the awareness of the consciousness that is beyond the mind. What I do find helpful is meditation does bring peace to the mind, develops us, it helps us develop the ability to silence the mind, though quite honestly, it can be very difficult to silence the mind. But while we are able to do this, and when we are able to do this, this enables us to experience that state of non-duality. In the state of inner silence, we rise above the illusion of identification with the mind, of identification with our thoughts, of identification with our ego. It goes beyond the illusion of separateness, and it realizes the oneness of all things, the oneness with the one spirit. I speak of it all the time when I tell my story of my shamanic vision quest and the experiences I had when I first met the emissaries of light. That part of that experience for me was experiencing that oneness of going into the light, for lack of a better term, but that's what it felt like. It was like going into this gorgeous, huge, bright golden light and being able to feel connected with everything. It is almost as if a new consciousness is being born, where we see the world in a different way, and that changed my life forever. And I'm sure if any of you have experienced that oneness, that feeling of oneness with everything, it does. It changes your life forever. It is a new consciousness. So what do I mean when I say life is an illusion, that this is the illusion, that we live in a matrix of illusion? And a lot of people take it the wrong way. A lot of people say, well, it's very nihilistic, that, nothing matters, why bother, why try? Or on the other end of the spectrum, people are like, no, this is what's real, Again, the ego has a way of making us and tricking us into believing that this is all is real. But it does not mean that life is pointless at all. As a matter of fact, I always share a phrase that I learned. I don't know how many of you have ever taken EST training or landmark forum training or anything like that. And I remember one of the most profound things that I learned, or that I heard during that training when I took it 10 years ago, if not longer, was that they said they were going to give us the meaning of life at the end of the course. And yes, I'm going to give it away. I had to pay $900 for it. Actually, the company I worked for get paid $900 for it. But basically, the way they explained it, and it was very simple, is the secret of life is that life has no meaning. And the fact that it has no meaning has no meaning. I know, it's very, very Zen koan type thing. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's not pointless. And the idea that this is all an illusion is not pointless. From an ordinary point of view, things seem very solid and real in this consciousness, in this day-to-day waking consciousness. However, when we look closely, or when you look closely and begin to experience that transcendence through the illusion, you will see things are conditioned and they're changing. Things are conditioned by what happens before and during, and things are always changing. When we're in a good mood, what happens? We see lots of good things. It's almost, we can go into the whole law of attraction. You put out good, you get bad. Good, you think bad, you get bad. It's all energetic. When we're in a bad mood, we can only see the problems around us. So in this way, this is the example that we're living in kind of a dream state of an illusion, to show us that things we experience outside and inside aren't as independent, as solid as we're used to thinking. Things are very, how shall we say, uh, changing. They're constantly I'm waving my arms here. I wish I had the camera. It's kind of like a wave. It ebbs and it flows and the energy changes, and it's constantly, it's not solid. It's a constant conditioned change depending on where we are perceiving. In the Shurangama, I hope I can say that right, the Shurangama Sutra, Buddha reveals that what we take to be real, what we take to be the real world, may not be real at all, but rather distorted perceptions of reality arising from perceiving the world through our body and its senses. He called this the false perceptions arising from individual karma. And that's a whole nother talk. I've recently been working with some Reiki students trying to explain karma versus dogma versus energetic reaction. But going back to this, when we are looking and perceiving the world through our body and its senses, we are literally engaging in a false perception. And where does that false perception come? It comes from our past experiences. We are constantly comparing. We're constantly contrasting. We see something. We smell something. It reminds me of this. That reminds you of this. That reminds you of this. And then the thoughts begin to create that pattern in order for us to kind of to help us understand what it is we're sensing and what we're feeling. So it's almost as if, and I love this analogy, it's as if we're looking through a dirty window at night. What happens when we're looking through a dirty window at night? We have these like halos around the light, right? There's always like these halos around the light, but the halos are not real. They appear to be real, but they're not real, because if you were to take away the window or clean the window, that light would just be a pretty bright light. But because the window is dirty, the halos appear. Appearances, therefore, may not be the reality. So we cannot allow ourselves to be fooled. How many times have we speculated on something? How many times have you speculated about where your partner is, or what's going to happen tomorrow, or what's going on with the White House or something? And it is absolutely nothing to do with the reality of what's going on. When it comes to, for example, as a sacred activist, I walk a very fine line, a tightrope between reality, perception, emotion, and speculation. So for me, it's very important as a sacred activist to not fall into the trappings of the illusion of what the media creates. When the media says Donald Trump did this, or Hillary Clinton did this, or North Korea said this, I have to remind myself, and I'm constantly doing this, to remind myself that I wasn't there. I don't know what was said. I don't know what was done. I did not experience it. I am experiencing something that A, was experienced by somebody else secondhand, or B, something that was constructed for entertainment purposes to get advertising dollars, or to get clickbait, mental clickbait, for lack of a better term. So we have to be aware that appearances are not reality. Do not allow ourselves to be fooled, sometimes even by what we think we're seeing, by what we think we're feeling, by what we think or are speculating, drawing conclusions from speculation. Don't allow yourself to be fooled. One of my favorite meditations that I do, especially when I catch myself going into these, I'm sure we all go through it, that spiral of, oh my God, this is happening and this is going to happen, and that anxiety, that fear, or that concern that this is really happening in my life is, well, even when it's good, it's a good practice to have. But to remember who I am, that I am a part of Source, that I am one with everything. I use this as a mantra, and I actually got it I don't even know if it was really said by the Buddha, but I saw it in the film Little Buddha back in the 90s, the one with Keanu Reeves. By the way, if you haven't seen it, it is a good movie. He did a great job playing doing the story of Siddhartha. But in the end, when we see Mara, the Lord of the Ego, for lack of the better term, when Buddha is going into nirvana, when he's getting ready to achieve that enlightenment, and Mara's like, no, you will never be free or whatnot. And he just looks at the image of Mara, or the demon of illusion, for lack of a better term, and he said, "O Lord of my ego, you are pure illusion. You do not exist. O Lord of my ego, you are pure illusion. You do not exist." I love that as a mantra. And actually, I'll ask you, if you can, say that aloud or say it in your mind with me. And just say it with me in your mind for just one moment. O Lord of my ego, you are pure illusion. You do not exist. Now, some people might find themselves feeling more peaceful. Some people might feel resentful, resistance. And the reason why I asked you to do this is I want you to note how your mind reacted to those words. Was it, oh my God, this is so stupid? Or how dare you say I don't exist? I just kind of wanted to nudge you into perhaps experiencing how the ego has such a strong hold on our identity. So remember those words. O Lord of my ego, you are pure illusion. You do not exist. In The Tao is the Tao, chapter 80, it says, to serve your ego is to worship a false identity created by yourself. I'll repeat that one part again. To serve your ego is to worship a false identity created by yourself. It is like someone suffering from amnesia, reinventing herself because she has forgotten who she is. So think about that. Think about what that means. When we get so immersed in our identity, when we are so immersed in the story, and I like to use that term, I use it quite a bit, the story of who we are. We all have a story. I am Bernard Alvarez. I'm part Native American. I was raised Latino. I am a metaphysician. That's just a story. It's an identity. I am something different every moment throughout the day, depending on who I'm talking to, depending how I'm feeling. And beyond all of that, I am a spirit experiencing the human condition. We are all merely spirits experiencing the human condition. And when we realize this is the reality, to serve our identity, to serve our ego, like the Tao is the Tao says, is to worship a false identity that we created by ourselves. People have been through crises, people have had joys and victories, we've had losses, and those affect us. They affect our emotion and they affect our story, which affects our identity. And how many times, a great example of this is post-traumatic stress syndrome, PTSD, shell shock, whatever you want to call it, trauma. When we have trauma, we are always on guard for not allowing that trauma to happen again. We constantly relive that trauma when we feel we're about to experience it again. Therefore, we embrace it, we own it. And I'm not saying that it wasn't real. I'm not saying that the soul was not fragmented from trauma, but it's not who we are. We are not the trauma. We are still a spirit having a human experience. So I like this analogy to understand the ego a little bit more. The ego is similar to an imaginary friend, or what some people may describe as a second self. Your ego is similar to an imaginary friend. We can compare it to a character we dress up, assign a personality to, and we role play it. It allows us to externally appear however we want to, regardless of how we are actually feeling inside. We are then now creating an entire illusory matrix for others when we do this. The ego is manipulative. It is a false betrayal of who we are, and it allows us to create a reality that falsely determines our self-worth. Going back to that, oh Lord of my ego, saying you are pure illusion, you do not exist, that's when the ego begins to manipulate us. When we begin to disassociate our identity from ego consciousness, when we begin to move into cosmic, universal, source consciousness, the ego will do everything it can to A, distract you, B, to make you feel like you're going crazy, everything you can, so it wins the battle of the identity. Some people tap in and out of their ego. I do it all the time. I'm sure what many of us do. While other people exist cocooned within it with very little, if any, connection to their core self. And I'm sure we all know people like that. They are just a shell of a person that are just 100% identified with their ego mentality. And not in a bad way or necessarily a good way, but they can't see past that identity of the ego. The core self is the essence of our authentic natural state, and it does not require any external validation. The self-image that we portray through our ego is usually an inflated alternative version of our core self, or a reduced, insecure version of our core self. Many people inflate their ego, and there are those, I was one of those people, that reduce the ego and, well, reduce the identity of who we are through insecurities or anxieties. The ego is nourished and grows stronger from external connections and validations. Our core self is nourished and grows stronger from the internal connection and validation when we are connected with our higher self